No life without matter?
Yeah, and I think nothing or almost nothing would exist. So it's just like, I mean, almost everything consists of matter. So yeah, there would be almost nothing.
Okay. Anybody else want to add to that? Okay. And good job, Eugene. Go by Eugene.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else want to add something?
Like scientists classify matter into three states: solid, liquid, gas. So without matter, we wouldn't have any of those.
Okay. Riley, excellent. Or Mackenzie, right? What I want you to note up here is that matter, why it's important, it is directly responsible for the idea of time beginning. So if you ever hear somebody say like 6,000 years ago, time began, or 13.1 billion years ago, time began, has anybody ever heard that? Anybody heard about like time began? Everybody heard that? I mean, we have a linear timeline, right? Okay, so that's what they're thinking is of this linear timeline, and there's a point on the linear timeline where you have a beginning. Now, in order for that to be true, matter had to have formed from nothing at that point. That would be the Big Bang Theory. Big Bang Theory says 13.1 billion years ago, matter formed out of nothing from emptiness. All right, so raise your hand if you think that is a Christian belief. The Big Bang. Raise your hand if you think that's a Christian belief. Okay. Nobody thinks that's a Christian belief? Take it. Huh? All right, so the Big Bang was proposed by Georges Lemaitre. He was a Belgian Catholic priest. Belgian Catholic priest. Now, if you are a Belgian Catholic priest, he was very well educated. He wrote his proposal and he submitted it to the Catholic Church. Now, when you submit your proposals to the Catholic Church, they're going to do one of two things. They're going to do what? They're going to accept or they're going to excommunicate you. So do you think he was excommunicated? No. He was endorsed. The Pope endorsed the Big Bang Theory when? In 1950. I want to write that down. Pope endorsed Big Bang Theory in 1950. Now, the Pope is considered to be Catholic, which means universal. The Christians don't necessarily agree with the Big Bang Theory. Why?
Because it's Christian belief that everything was created by God.
Okay. Anything else? It introduces emptiness. The Protestant, if you look into Protestant theology is ex nihilo, write it down, X-E-X-N-I-H-I-L-O, ex nihilo. And ex nihilo does not have emptiness associated with it. Ex nihilo basically says something from nothing. That's what ex nihilo says. So ex nihilo, Protestant view typically is that everything you see came from nothing. There was no emptiness. It was just nothing and then something. Everybody clear? If you have nothing and then you have something, you have a beginning to time. You don't need emptiness to clarify time beginning. Is everybody clear on that? You have nothing, which is no matter. No matter is not easy to do because it requires very low pressures. You have 14 pounds per square inch of pressure on you right now. If you go to outer space, the pressure is a lot less. temperature's a lot colder. So you try to get very cold temperatures, very low pressures, and you're trying to destroy matter. That is, turn it into nothing. So the Catholic thinking on this is very wise. They haven't been able to do this. We haven't been able to, in the lab, turn something into nothing. We've not been able to take matter and turn it into nothing. Catholics basically concluded it was not possible. Like, some people say it's impossible for God to lie. Some things just God isn't going to do. Well, they concluded that this just wasn't possible. So, what? What? What do you mean how?
Did you just say, they concluded that?
It was not possible to turn something into nothing. They concluded it was not possible because the temperatures that got below absolute zero, the temperatures were just not low enough to turn something into nothing. So that's when they proposed emptiness. So emptiness is the absence of time, space, matter, and energy. Emptiness is the absence of everything you see. So their thinking is that would be more powerful than nothing to destroy both of them. So it's a reasonable theory, but the problem is you can never test for emptiness, right? That's a big problem. So that's the Big Bang Theory. You got emptiness, nothing, and then something. And then the Protestant view, you got ex nihilo, you got nothing, and then something. Do the Mormons believe that? No, they believe ex matria. Ex matria is kind of like Aristotle. If you follow Aristotle, he thought like earth, fire, air, and water. Democritus thought the atom couldn't be divided. Atom means can't take half of. So ex matria basically is matter's always been in existence. If you have more than one type of eternal matter, what do you have? You'd have more than one God. Like if you look God of the war, God of, if you go back into like history of human beings, they had all these different gods, all right? So if you have more than one eternal matter, are you understanding that? If there's two different eternal matters, they've always been, then you would really have two different gods, because God would basically be timeless. It's always been, right? Now when we say something's timeless, it's tied to matter, because matter produces data. And data promotes truth. If you have no data, you have no truth. Big problem with ex nihilo is that it promotes no accountability. You can just start making something out of nothing over here. Where'd you get that something? It just came from nothing. No accountability. There are no opposites. Big Bang. Emptiness, nothing, and something are equivalent. They're equal. How are they equal? They produced one another. Nothing came from emptiness. Well, how did it do that? Well, emptiness had a plan for nothing. So they're equivalent. Well, how did something come out of nothing? Well, nothing had a plan for it. It's equivalent. Fundamentally, you can't deny where you came from. If you came from nothing, then it's equivalent. You're equivalent to it. You'll return to it. It's called heat death. That's the thinking, is that everything you see will eventually just go back to nothing or emptiness. My big problem with it is it has not been proven. So you're promoting something that hasn't been proven. That's a problem. What would happen if they, in a lab, were to take something and turn it into nothing? What would they prove then if they did that? They would prove the steady state theory. Write down steady state theory. You'll see this again. We're just introducing it now. Usually you have to tell people something 3 times before it kind of registers. When we go over it again, you might have done a little research. You can ask me some questions about it. So we're just introduce it now. We'll see it again in chapter 2 when we talk about matter. So steady state theory would be that at any time, something can form out of nothing. It was a big debate back in the 70s, the steady state theory. And they concluded that the Big Bang singularity would be the best. So if they ever prove something from nothing, really it boils down to something from nothing. Because you're not going to be able to validate emptiness in the Big Bang theory. It's just not, it's a hypothetical. Hypothetical, but it's just not proven. Philosophical, more like. Okay, so time is associated with matter. Has it always been in existence? We haven't proven that it can be destroyed. So the evidence for me would base that it's always been in it. You need to destroy it in order for me to believe that there are no opposites. My, I guess you'd say, faith rests on that there are opposites. I live in an opposite world. You know, there's hot and cold and good and evil. You know, I've seen people do good things and I've seen people do bad things. We have something called prisons, or correction, prisons. Yeah, where we put the bad people. Yeah, prison. I mean, why would you put people in prison if there wasn't evil or people that did things bad, right? Accountability is the big issue there too. I mean, if ex nihilo is true, there's basically no accountability. There's a big difference between God being beyond understanding and beyond your understanding. If you're promoting something that's beyond understanding, then you can like blame it for all your problems. You're like, well, that thing's beyond understanding. No opposites. Can just make whatever it wants to out of nothing. I mean, I'm just saying. We're talking about matter. That's what we're talking about here. So what's physics the study of? What's biology the study of? We talked about that yesterday. Life, right? And we talked yesterday about the parthenogenesis gene. We're talking about evolution being a truth. What was the first mammal? If I know what a mammal is, raise your hand. Know what a mammal is. It's a mammal. Are you a mammal? Yes. What does that mean? Were you like a chicken egg when you were born? So you had a, what kind of birth? Live birth. Yeah, so mammal live birth. Like deer have live birth, cattle have live birth. What was the first animal that they did parthenogenesis on in the lab and proved it? Anybody know? On a mammal? First mammal? No. They haven't done it in the problem is that when you do it, it produces a lot of deformities, and people don't like to see that. They did it in something that reproduces fast, starts with the R. A rabbit. Yeah, this article here, if you scroll down and you read it, the first proven in a mammal was the rabbit. What did they do to the rabbit to make it do the change in chromosome number? I don't know if it was a change in type because I don't know if the rabbit was female and male. I have to study it more. It didn't say in the article. They had to change the temperature that the rabbit was living in. And they changed the chemicals. So they basically studied other things like the bees that are going through this more frequently, and then they put that same chemical that they noticed in the bee into the rabbit. We do this with tobacco. We can take a gene from a human being for insulin and put it in tobacco, and we can make insulin. So there are genes that can be comfortable in different environments. Make sense? Have you heard about that? Insulin, tobacco. All right. Now, when they did these modifications, there were some deformities. So when we talk about deformities, we tend to talk about cancer. Cancer is typically associated with deformities. So there are two types of cancers. You have the genetic type, right? Because you'd be altering the genes there with these chemicals. And then you have the environmental. Which one's more difficult to treat? The genetic is much more difficult to treat because it's all through your body. Give me an example of an environmental cancer. Lung, smoking, asbestos. Good job there, Nathan. Any other environmental cancer? Like alcohol, if you drink alcohol, it can damage your liver. environmental cancer. Now, if you come down with a cancer, first thing you need to tell yourself is this genetic or environmental? And that's going to determine your treatment. Try to figure out what in your environment you think could have caused these conditions. You ever heard of Bob Ross? He died of cancer. I think it was environmental. He did a lot of oil painting, and if you ever watch him takes his brush, he was in the military for 20 years, so we don't know if that contributed to it, but we do know that he used a lot of solvents. So you try to get those out. Look, the doctor's going to tell you if you're smoking to do what? Stop smoking first. Or I'm not telling you anything a doctor wouldn't tell you. Stop smoking. If you got liver cancer, stop drinking, and see then if it doesn't slow down, and then 2 or 3 weeks later, 6 months later, then see, okay, are you going to need further treatment? When we say further treatment, chemotherapy is dangerous. It's only been around about 100 years. Where did it originate? World War I. When they were using chemical weapons on people, they studied the after effects and then they developed chemicals from it. So we don't have long-term data on the chemicals, and they're constantly changing them. Every time you change it, you're decreasing the length of your data on it. The long-term ramifications of it. That makes sense on that? Chemotherapy, radiation are both really good tools to fight cancer. You just need to be very careful with them. Make sense? All right, so back to physics. What's physics a study of? Yeah, motion. I would say work, because work has a formula associated with it, and like physics is all formula-based. You're trying to solve for something. Work equals force times distance. Force equals mass times acceleration. The reason why I really say work, because the question is matter always working? Some people say that it is. There's scriptures that say matter is always working. And work is associated with mass. Mass is associated with matter. And that ties it back to chemistry, right? That's the whole idea. Do the sciences kind of relate? If you're going to say biology is life, chemistry is matter, and then work is how you make money, typically, right?
Maybe physics like is the study of energy.
Yeah, potential energy, kinetic energy. Yeah, that's going to be work. Potential energy is stored energy for work. Like if you have a dam, you're storing the water for the purpose of generating electricity so you can do work with it.
That work, the energy from the work powers that, and then matter makes up organisms. Kind of just goes through the cycle.
Right, the goal once again is to determine whether matter has always been in existence, right? Now, genetic cancers are really difficult to treat. You understand? What's the best thing you could do to prevent them? All right, think about if I have, let's say, 2 Labrador retrievers, right? If I promote breeding them over and over again, what's it going to produce? It starts with the R. Biology, you study recessive genes. Do you remember the little Mendel charts? You got dominant, recessive. Do you remember doing those? If you breed the same animal in the same family over and over again, they used to do this with royalty in Europe. All the kings and queens would stay in the same family, and they ended up having recessive genes pop up, like hemophilia. So if you, like Ken and Barbie, they look the same. Ken and Barbie doll look the same. If you are promoting in your government inbreeding, then in the long run you're going to have a lot more genetic problems. Genetic cancers pop up more frequently then. In Africa, what is the, can you give me one result of inbreeding? Albinoism. If you inbreed, eventually you'll have the white skin pop out because animals that have fur typically you have white skin, and dark skin is a benefit because it pulls you out of the sun. If you have white skin, you go to Florida and you're kind of walking around, you don't know when to get out of the sun, so you get burnt. Fair skin, people get burnt easier in the sun. If you didn't know this, there's no mechanism to pull you out of the sun. All right, so if you're in Africa and you have an albino, it's going to be a problem for you because you're probably going to get burnt. What else is going to be a problem for you? You're going to have a problem hunting. Like if you're the white alligator, oh man, there's a white alligator right over there. I see it. There goes the white bunny. There goes, the white deer. Now, if you're in conditions where it's cold and snowing, okay, but if you're in Africa when there's not a lot of snow, you're going to stick out pretty easily. You're going to have a hard time hunting. Other animals are going to see you very easily. It's called, you don't have any camouflage. So that would be a problem. You would probably then want to put on some clothing. If you go over to Africa today, most of them, they don't wear a lot of clothing. But if you're white, you probably put some clothing on because, UV, you're going to turn red. I wonder what's going on with you. Now, in some of the traditions over there, they would witchcraft stuff. They'd cut off the arms and legs of the albinos and crush up their bones and eat them. Why would they do that? Huh? No, they wanted to do that because they thought you are what you eat. Now, your diet determines a lot in fitness. If you didn't know this, exercise and diet can determine how successful you are. So diet plays a major role in life. If you dismiss diet, you're kind of dismissing, success. They'll tell you that if you're trying to lose weight, exercise alone will not do it. You have to control your diet as well. So diet plays a big factor. But genetics is the reason for that particular albinoism. That would be a recessive gene. There are cases, recorded cases, where I think white people have had a black baby. It's just not as common. Yeah. You can look it up. I mean, two white people had a black baby. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And when they add together, you get a certain, I think it's phenotype, they got it at a larger level because there's more genes.
Yeah. Dark skin color most likely is dominant. I don't have data in front of me to support it, but from the perspective of hunting and from the perspective of protection from ultraviolet light, that would give you the best reason why it would be dominant. To get you out of the sun. Black colors pull you out of the sun faster. Does everybody understand that? Any question on that? So, yeah, the government, if they want to decrease genetic deformities, they would promote interracial marriage. So if you don't want to marry somebody who looks just like you, the Ken and Barbie thing is really not good. Because if you have kids that have genetic deformities, it's very expensive. Like my daughter, she has one kidney, and we went to the hospital, and it was like $1,000 just for that x-ray. Yeah. Doctors typically, if you have a child that's deformed, they will advise you sometimes to abort that child. Yeah. I have friends that have Down syndrome kids, and they were advised to do that, and they chose not to. I'm just telling you that it does occur. If you look at the abortion rates, they're going to be higher for deformities. Yeah. My wife, she's a little different than me. I understood this. I learned this in high school. So I thought to myself, yeah, I should not marry Barbie because, my metabolism is a little bit faster. So my wife's metabolism is a little different than mine. You look for just, subtle things. If you're that type of person, you might look for differences in your earlobe connection because there's genes that are associated with that. Some people have their earlobe attached to their side. Some people don't. Y'all familiar with that? Yeah. So try to find somebody I would recommend. It's kind of like with other animals too. They do this with cattle. You don't want to go with the same cattle, bull and cow every time you're mating because you're going to end up having all these recessive genes. It's a problem. You have to call the vet in frequently. That gets expensive. Y'all familiar with that? Just breeding.